We are really lucky. Today we have Zach Randall and also Rick here from ListenLayer. And Zach is the founder and CEO of ListenLayer, and he's going to share with us the perfect data event, how to 10x your marketing data in minutes so that you can boost your marketing results. If you don't know what ListenLayer is, it is the world's first and only cloud data layer platform. If you don't know what that is, you will after this presentation. Fred raves about this tool, and thank you for connecting us, Fred, with Zach. So with that, Rick, Zach, I'm going to pass it over to you and stop my share.
Okay, cool. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the introduction there, Kayla, and good to see some familiar faces on today. We'll be talking about ListenLayer, but overall, I'm hoping you guys will walk away with some new tidbits and some additional knowledge. Thank you guys to the Data Driven U team for having us today. It's definitely a privilege. And as Kayla mentioned, this is what I call the perfect data event. More specifically, I'm going to show you guys today how to 10x your marketing data, make it 10 times better so that ultimately you can boost your marketing results, which is the end game, right? We want to drive increases in our revenue. We want to be able to scale our advertising, drive down our customer acquisition cost, increase our MROI, whatever the metric is. We want to use that marketing data to drive those results. So I want to make a bold claim today that your data is broken. I can almost guarantee you that when you come into a client, their data is broken. If you're working on the client side and you guys are going through your measurement strategy, or you think that it's working, it's probably actually broken. And I'll dive into this a little bit more, but you're probably asking, who is this guy who's telling me that my data is broken? So my name is Zach Randall. I'm the one in the back corner there, next to Nick Yorchek, who was my previous business partner. For 13 years, we built and ran a digital agency, pushing around 350 clients. By the time we exited that agency, we were working with 5 Fortune 500 companies. We managed hundreds of millions in media. And we ultimately sold that agency. At that agency, in addition to, for the last 4 years, me being the one who's kind of leading it from a CEO standpoint, I was leading all of our technical marketing teams, from analytics and paid media development and programming. And so I've been around the block when it comes to measurement strategies and trying to help clients get the data that they need to be successful. So what is perfect data? I want to define this. And so I'm going to ask you to think about your data strategies from a marketing perspective as I run through a list of words that I use to describe perfect data. So the first one is that it is planned. You've actually sat down and you've put together a documented plan to make sure that your measurement strategy aligns to your organization's needs and the goals. And with that plan, then when you go out into the world and you implement that, whether it's using Google Tag Manager or some other tool or combination of tools, it's organized. It's organized because it came from the plan. And both of those two things are really critical, because we want your measurement strategy, your data, to be understood, not just by the person who happened to go, finagle it together in Google Tag Manager and then tell everybody that it's working, but we want it to be understood by multiple people within the organization. We need it to be consistent. The number of times that I've come into an organization and seen, they just keep rebuilding their measurement strategy. Every time there's a new agency, every time they have a new, digital marketing manager who has some GTM experience, somebody's going in there and fiddling with it, and they can't compare things year over year because they just keep rebuilding it because it was never really planned and organized to begin with. We want it to be advanced. We really need to start going beyond the basics. It's more than just conversion tracking that we're talking about here. We want our data to be enriched. We want it to be customizable for your business. Ultimately, we want to be able to tie it down to revenue. We want it to be fast. So if it's running client side, we want it to be as lightweight as possible, but ideally we'd move as much of it as we can to the server side. And at the same time, we don't want this to be rocket science or data science. You shouldn't need to be a data scientist or a programmer to set this up. We want anyone to be able to do it and achieve these things. Now, something that you'll hear me kind of harping on a lot, just because of the challenges that I've seen with so many different companies, is that you need to have a centralized source of truth. You need to have a single place where you're defining what is a conversion, what is a primary conversion, what is a secondary conversion, what are those KPIs, what is an engaged session. But at the same time, even though we centralize it, we need the data and the different platforms that we use. So many times we work with a client and they're like, well, but I have my Google Analytics set up, but we're managing hundreds of thousands of dollars in Facebook spend, right? And we need the data in Facebook. And maybe the chat tool sends some events to GA because it has an integration, but what about, the native Facebook data? We need that data in all the places that we actually end up using it. We obviously want it to be accurate. We want it to be reliable. And when you centralize it and you have those two things, you can also monitor it so that you know if and when something breaks or changes that needs to be addressed. And then there's this big elephant in the room. We need to be compliant. And so a perfect data strategy is still going to have a privacy first concept. And ideally, we wouldn't have to go bring all these kind of third-party CMP tools into the picture, and we could just actually manage it in that centralized source of truth. And this one's a kicker. You should be able to identify people in your measurement strategy. You are allowed to know who your customers are. Trust me, the sales team does this all the time, and this drives me nuts. Somehow sales, which literally sits right across from marketing, they're able to know everything about everybody, including loading tens of thousands of random cold prospects into Salesforce and cold calling them all day. But a customer who actually comes to your website and willingly fills out a form and has some behavioral data, somehow, we're not allowed to know that information, and everything is kept anonymous. Marketing is put into this black box of anonymity, and I think it's about time that we move beyond that. The reason is because it's not your data. In a perfect data strategy, it would be your data. It wouldn't be Google's data, but Google's trained everybody to believe that like marketing data has to be anonymous because, well, Google's using your data, so they need it to be anonymous. And ultimately, our entire goal here is to map what I call a journey to revenue, which is understanding how all that top of funnel data and measurement actually maps down to revenue so that we can boost our marketing results. And this is the challenge that I've dealt with for 15 years working with clients, when as an agency or as a marketing department, we're held to these high standards of driving revenue and measuring revenue, yet our hands are tied, which is why so many of us feel like this. You feel like, data is just kind of punching you in the face. And, and I want to reassure you of a couple things. First of all, if you feel that way, it's not your fault. There are outside forces that cause that. And second, you're not alone. You're probably surrounded by, a bunch of people on this call or people that might be watching this in the future who actually feel the same, especially as we face, the daunting task of Google Analytics 4 and trying to explain to clients and bosses and even understand ourselves, like the difference in the data and how do I get it into Looker and how do I use the data. So this is how this typically goes. Our desire is to get at least good data, maybe not perfect data. And then there's these roadblocks that are outside forces, like some of the ones I've already talked about, that get in the way of achieving that goal. And so as good practitioners who want to achieve results, what do? We gravitate towards the thing that we can control, which is, well, we have Google Tag Manager. Let's just let everybody jump into Google Tag Manager and throw a bunch of stuff together and call it a tracking strategy and hope it all works. You could become a programmer, you could hire a programmer, and you could build a bunch of custom scripts, and that can lead to problems. What if the programmer leaves and now you have all these custom scripts you have to manage inside of Google Tag Manager or on your website? Or you could be like most marketers who kind of, plug their ears, stick their head in the sand and try to move on and just say, it's working. We'll just look at our Salesforce data. So I want to give you guys a little bit of a background on ListenLayer, how the journey that I've gone on to get to where I was. This starts back when I was running my agency. We were working with a large company, a multi-billion dollar publicly traded company, and we had a challenge. We were just brought into this company, and we had a 3-month project that was, hopefully going to turn into a longer term engagement. But one of the challenges we had was that we needed to develop an accurate and reliable view of their marketing KPIs to defend the budget. And we basically had 3 weeks to do it. And that's because somebody had come in from another division and basically said, we could use that budget over here. And so we had just landed this huge client, and we were already at risk of like the program just kind of being pulled out from under us and not being able to do anything. And it was quite a complicated situation. They had 2 different websites on different domains. They had 2 landing page systems, a chat tool, 2 marketing automation systems. No joke. They were using Marketo and HubSpot simultaneously. They had Salesforce. They had over 300 forms on their website. Now, this was obviously a complicated situation, and your situations may not be this complicated, but I would challenge you in feeling that way, because if you really peel back the layer on most companies' websites, they usually have a couple different random form systems for some reason. They usually have a chat tool, and the chat tool might send data to Google Analytics, but you're running LinkedIn ads or you're running Facebook ads. There's all sorts of complexity that can be introduced without even realizing it once you start thinking beyond the basics of conversion tracking. And so we had two big questions. The first one is everything even tracking? When you have that many forms and a chat tool and two different marketing automation systems and that many domains, it's pretty obvious that, like, probably not everything is tracking, but we need to prove what that is. And so the next question is, how can we get all of these things tracking quickly? We weren't the programming team. This was a massive organization. It's not like we were just going to call up somebody in IT and say, hey, can you throw some code on these websites for us and get this done quickly, please? So we had these two challenges, and I'm just going to cut to the chase of the aha moment that I had. I had worked with the data layer in the past with my programming team, and I'm not going to get into the data layer too deep today. So don't worry if you're not a technical person, but I am going to explain it in layman's terms and the power that it's given us. And then you can basically just skip over it and use Listen Layer without even understanding the data layer. But the data layer itself was the thing that was going to allow me to solve that second problem of needing to track everything quickly. If I could just get everything in the data layer, I could basically just read it. So I would know, no matter which of the 300 forms were submitted, I would know that a form was submitted and I could actually track it. Now, the problem was getting the data into the data layer. And that's where, through a series of research and working with my programming team, I realized we could take this concept of just like basic JavaScript listeners, and we could build really robust listeners for specific purposes on specific websites. And the listeners could be fine-tuned so that they basically output the data layer information. Now, let me break down these things for those of you who don't necessarily understand that on the surface. A listener is like a sensor. Think of it this way. You're not going to take a thermometer into your car and expect it to tell you how fast your car is going. A thermometer is built for one purpose. Now, the very first thermometer took a lot of time to build, had to be fine-tuned. There was some science behind it. I don't actually know the history, but I know it didn't fall out of the sky. But now it works. You turn it on or you use it in a proper way, and it does one thing very well, and it does it perfectly. And that's what a listener is. You just turn it on, it tells you exactly what you need in a perfectly structured manner, and it just works. Now, the data layer might feel a little bit more complicated. I like to compare the data layer to a centralized shipping center. Imagine this: you have 5 friends across the country and you want to send them gifts. Are you going to call up 5 FedEx drivers to come to your house and give them each a gift and tell them to drive across the country to your friend's house to deliver it? No, absolutely not. You're going to have one FedEx driver. They're going to come and they're going to bring those packages to a centralized shipping center. It's going to be processed in a fairly automated manner, and then it's going to be distributed out to your friends. This is how we track things today. You might have a form submission and you have these different destinations that you want to send things to: Google Ads, Microsoft Ads, LinkedIn Ads. And you're going to have to set up all 5 of these different kind of data actions or data events. And of course, you could use Google Tag Manager to simplify some of this, but how many times have you gone into LinkedIn Ads and seen, well, we're tracking something through Google Tag Manager in this way, but now somebody's gone into LinkedIn Ads and just started to set up goals based on thank you pages, and they're not really tracking it all. And, Facebook's a little different. They want these specific standard lead events, and, Google Analytics can be set up with URLs or events. And so even with a tool like Google Tag Manager, you end up managing these kind of unique events. Well, what happens if you have 3 forms and a chat tool, and now all of a sudden these lines, which are kind of vectors that represent complexity, there's 20 unique data events that have to be set up and managed. And we're still just talking about top of the funnel. We're talking about way up high, just general touch points, just trying to understand, who's anonymously coming to my site and taking an important action. Well, if we insert the data layer in here and then we redraw our vectors, we're able to just reduce the complexity by 55% just by introducing the data layer and doing nothing else. And so we combine these two things with this client. And what we were able to do was build enough of these listeners quickly enough in a fine-tuned enough fashion and generate those into the data layer that we literally, in a matter of 3 weeks, took their massive complex situation and made it 100% automated. So we knew every single form that was tracking and every chat activity, no matter what system it was on, no matter what domain it was on, and we could attribute it back to the advertising platform. Doesn't that sound awesome to be able to do that in a completely automated fashion. And so what happened was we had success. We won the business. We actually, that agency still works with that business and now works with 4 or 5 different divisions. And so you can see how powerful this one solution was in enabling my agency and my business to massively grow by bringing this solution to a client. And ultimately, the success came from this one critical factor, that the client was spending all this money and literally was tracking 25% of the conversions that they should have been tracking. And just by adding these on there and doing it in an automated fashion, we were able to 4x their data and show that obviously you probably shouldn't pull the plug on this strategy. So fast forward to today, and this aha moment has just continued to evolve, kind of driven by my passion just to help companies and their data with this one simple concept, that the data layer is actually a great place for a bunch of other stuff. And so we just kept kind of adding on to it and making it more and more powerful. So let's take a kind of zoom out a little bit more, make this slightly more complicated. This is Larry, the layer. And so he's a listen layer. He's over here. He's generating your data layer activity automatically. And you read it with Google Tag Manager. And I never really liked this setup because you still had to be a Google Tag Manager expert and you still had to finagle stuff. And usually when you inherit somebody's Google Tag Manager, it's kind of a nightmare to begin with, and it's just a big daunting task to clean up. But we realized we could start putting other things in the data layer to simplify this. So the first thing we did is we decided, let's define our conversions in the data layer. So we wrote some basic logic rules, similar to like, hey, if the user sees this URL, this thank you page, it's a conversion. Although we tend to use actual form submissions because that's what the listener tracks instead of thank you pages. But so we define that directly in the data layer. So if you have 6 conversions, they're just defined centrally. The second thing is that we could define our destinations. Well, I may want to send 5 of my conversions to all these other platforms, and the 6th one, in addition to the 5, I want to send to a different platform for some reason. Maybe there's a mix and match, or maybe I just want to send them all there. Well, you could just turn on, hey, I want to send it to Google Ads and Microsoft Ads and LinkedIn Ads, and whichever ones those are, you have to plug in some information, which brings us to what I call a data action template. Think of this as like a defined chunk of data that a destination needs for a specific purpose. So a Google Ads event requires, these pieces of information, whereas a LinkedIn ads event requires slightly different information, maybe formatted differently. Facebook has its own set of standard events. So we spent months and months taking all these kind of protocols and building them into data templates that could actually just be reflected directly in the data layer. And the last thing is we started to realize, we had all these clients asking us for like enhanced conversion tracking. I want to be able to put the user's email address into my Google Ads conversion and all of those things to improve that. And we realized, well, we have the data because it just comes from the listener. The user fills out a form. We can identify them as a person. So let's, enough with this anonymous stuff. Let's just allow users to identify people when they give their information through a chat, e-commerce, or form. We'll put it right there in the data layer so we can use it. Now, keep in mind, you don't have to do anything for this other than tell Larry what you want your conversions to be. He does everything else, right? He's the one who does all the templates and the conversions and all of this. I'm showing you guys behind the scenes so you can understand kind of the journey that we went on. And then it was really driving me nuts that I still had to go into Google Tag Manager and do stuff. So we basically applied to use the Google Tag Manager API. And now you can just send all this stuff to GTM automatically. I then woke up one morning and realized, why don't we just build our own server side? And so in a couple months, we're going to be launching our first version of server-side tagging for all of our major destinations. They'll probably be rolling out in a slightly different kind of order. But the goal with this is I want to bring to market what I call 100% first-party tracking, where the only thing that runs on your website is the lightweight listen layer library, and you can actually point your subdomain to us, and everything gets handled directly over your domain name, including the loading of client-side scripts, which, by the way, has been reduced by 95% because all of them are now running server-side in the cloud, and you literally do that by just flipping a switch. Other things that we have on our roadmap is we're launching Listen Layer Analytics. I actually was just demoing an early version of this a couple days ago. And think of this as Google Analytics on steroids. You can actually identify real people, and you can obtain heat maps from them and session recordings and things like that. So think of it as Google Analytics plus your person data plus Hotjar all rolled together. And we have a really robust consent feature right now that's being converted into more of a full CMP tool. So you can manage which destinations you need to block based on the region the user came from directly right there. We will also then be integrating with Salesforce from another software product that I have that has a robust Salesforce integration. And so I want to pause right now. Now I've given you guys kind of a view of what we're doing here, and jump into the platform and give you guys just a real quick overview. I'm not going to walk you through every single thing that I have set up here, but I have a quick test website. And I just want to point out that this site does have an e-commerce platform. It has resources with a bunch of forms. It has, each of these will lead to a different form. And just for the sake of brevity here, I'm going to focus probably on just using this newsletter form. So when I fill tests out and things like that, you can just see it real fast. So I'm going to run a test from ListenLayer, and I'm going to show you just kind of a little bit behind the scenes of what the tool is doing here. So on the right-hand side is your website live. So if I want to interact with this, and let me just jump to a different page. I'll go to a resource page. You can see what's happening on the left-hand side is we're receiving the data layer activity that's automatically generated by the listeners. But bear in mind, this is a server-side view. So this is not a client-side view of things. This is actual data layer that has activity that has already been received by ListenLayer, processed and pushed back to your local client in real time. So extremely fast. And you can see we have a form here. And what you'll notice is that the system already knows that we have two gravity forms loaded on the page. We have this one right here, and we have the one down here in the newsletter. Well, what happens if I attempt to fill out this form, but I don't actually put any information in there? Well, we already know that we had a failed form submission. So let me end my test, and I'm going to jump back in the interface. And for those of you who are not familiar with the interface, first of all, we're constantly making updates to this as we roll out new features. And second of all, I'm just going to keep it real high level. So don't worry about needing to navigate or understand what we're doing. I'm just going to try to explain some concepts here and things that you can do inside of the platform. The first thing under destinations is we can centrally define what I call conversions, what we all call conversions. And in this case, I've already set up a simple conversion for when a chat starts. I don't know if you noticed, but there's a chat service on the site. I think it's the live chat service. So we have a live chat conversion. And the way that works is you just write a basic if-then statement, but you base it off of the automated event. So if the live chat started event occurs, let's just call that our live chat conversion. So if you did have two chat tools for some random reason, you could roll those together into a single conversion. In addition to that, I've taken all of my form submissions and I've kind of broken those into sub conversions, if you will, like individual conversions for the type of form. And the way that we do this is we just group and categorize our forms based on a plan. That's the measurement framework where you sit down and you understand, you take an inventory and understand everything that's on your website. So what happens is this information just automatically gets pushed into the data layer. Imagine, an event occurs and there's just a piece of information that says, hey, this is a conversion, and it's a resource form that was submitted. So what we do with that from there is you can turn on and manage destinations directly. And I've already set up Google Ads just to kind of illustrate a quick point here. Inside the destination, we just have some basic templates. You're going to define, your conversion ID, which is kind of like the pixel ID. It's a confusing terminology from Google. We've already sent our remarketing tag and our conversion linker tag to Google Tag Manager. And I've also defined my conversions. So what you'll see here is that because I've centrally defined what is a conversion, the system automatically assumes, well, you're probably going to want to send those to Google Ads. So let's just create that as a pre-built template. And all you have to do is put in the label. Now, keep in mind, my goal here is to constantly iterate and reduce the amount of time that it takes to do this. And so in a near release, we'll have a full wizard where you just walk through, and then probably in a phase 2 of that release, it'll actually use the Google Ads API to either pull in or create the conversions yourself. So you don't even have to go get the labels. Now, within each conversion, you can choose whether you want to send Google the user provided data, which is automatically generated from the form and sent to them for enhanced conversion tracking. And so that's already all configured. And I want to take just a quick second here to jump into Google Tag Manager and show you guys how this works. So this is a full setup of Google Tag Manager. I'm looking at the folders view because it's, generally helps us to kind of organize and understand things. And what you should understand is that I have not touched this Google Tag Manager instance. It was a brand new instance. I never went in here and did anything. Listen Layer did all of this by me just clicking some buttons, and it basically deployed Listen Layer automatically. It set up rules for what my conversions were. It set up my Google Ads endpoints. You may not have noticed, but the site still has e-commerce on there. I think it's a WooCommerce site. And so it's automatically set up all the variables I would ever need from an e-commerce standpoint, and set those up so that they're ready to go and use inside of a destination like Google Ads. So let me jump back to my platform here, and I'll show you that real fast under e-commerce. So we know what the events are that Google Ads supports from an e-commerce standpoint. And we know that the purchase tag can, actually get sent on kind of a remarketing tag, but you can convert it into a conversion if you set it up the right way. So we do that for you automatically. All this information can just get sent. And if you want the purchase event to be considered a conversion, you just give it a conversion label. Now, one of the things that's still a sticking point is a lot of times when you inherit somebody's Google Tag Manager account, it's a complete mess. So we're working on a feature right now where when you set up a destination, Listen Layer will actually scan your Google Tag Manager and identify any related tags that already exist and give you an option to either pause those tags or just move them into a folder that's renamed something like old, need to review, and then it gives you the ability to go in and take what used to be a multi-hour project to clean up a Google Tag Manager account and clean it up in a matter of seconds. So let's jump to GA4. I'm going to show you something real fast. So I put my measurement ID in GA4. I've already sent Google Tag Manager my main configuration tag or my page view. All I'm going to do now is I really want GA4 to have my conversions. So I'm going to go ahead and select those. I'm not going to do any customization, but if I did want to send some custom parameters, I could. So all I'm doing here is I'm going through my conversions and I'm turning them on. I'm saying, hey, I want to use these inside of GA4. And as soon as I'm done, I'm going to save it. And because I don't have server side turned on, I'm just using the Google Tag Manager integration. We're going to get this quick wizard. It's going to tell us, hey, we're going to update all these conversions in GTM for GA4. I'm going to go ahead and publish the changes, and we'll watch Listen Layer do its magic inside of our Google Tag Manager account. Now, there's a decent number of things that need to be created, so sometimes it takes a little longer than others, but you can see it was relatively quick. Now, because I've turned these conversions on, Listen Layer wants me to publish as well. So I'm just going to say GA4 conversions. I'm going to publish that. And when I refresh here, you'll notice my workspace is going to be out of date. It's going to tell me not found, not found. I'll jump back to my folders, and you may or may not even realize this, but now we have all these conversion tags. Now, the reason we could use a universal tag in Google Tag Manager, and this is a side tangent, but in order to give the most flexibility for how you send different data, we do kind of extrapolate it out into one tag per conversion so you can kind of customize the different parameters that you want to send. So let's run a quick test. I don't even have to submit. I'm just going to do a test. Now I'm going to do this from the Google Tag Manager view because most people are familiar with that. And what we'll do here, as soon as my website loads, we'll make sure that we have a good connection here and data is coming through. We'll see our data layer activity coming in. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill out, I don't know, I'll give it a random email address here. And we'll fill out this information. Now, I filled out the form earlier this morning. So Listen Layer has my information already, and it has 2 different email addresses. And I just know that because I set this up real quick this morning. But the thing that we'll notice is that I have this event here called identify person. So Listen Layer knows automatically, hey, a person just filled this out and we have their information. And I won't get too deep into it, but the data layer activity is a big chunk of data here. And on my Gravity Forms submission right there, we just had Google Ads because I had only set that up as a conversion, but now we have our GA4 conversion firing and all the information that is set up inside that tag. And if I jump back to Google Ads, you'll notice that my personal data has now actually been sent to Google Ads in enhanced conversion tracking. And I literally had to do nothing. Now you have to go into Google Ads and accept their terms and conditions to use this feature still. But that just takes a matter of minutes as well. So that's a quick view into the actual platform. And I want to jump back to my deck here just a couple more minutes. Now, keep in mind that there's a number of things that I talked about on the previous slide that I didn't go through in the platform. We don't have enough time to today, but you can understand the vision that we're developing for this platform. And it's interesting. This has just become my pet project. I just want to do this forever and just make it better and better and better and speed up how long it takes to do things. But the ultimate result is that for agencies and my agency and clients, what would have taken 2 weeks to go clean up your GTM and build out your conversion strategy and get that all set up now can literally be done in a matter of minutes. And we're continuing to work on shrinking that. And what traditionally was viewed as kind of like a dumb or unintelligent thank you page tracking strategy is now enhanced data that has real meaning behind it that can be used. And what once was honestly kind of a shit show inside of Google Tag Manager can now be like perfectly organized in minutes. What was slow and primarily ran on the client side as we kind of release our 100% first party tracking and server side is going to be fast and really streamlined. That helps you then to move from what would be considered a third party tracking strategy where you have all these third party JavaScripts loading on your site to become a 100% first party. I didn't talk about it, but we have some really cool features coming out that'll start to support a cookieless environment. I think we're about a month away from the first version of that being released, and that'll be primarily first supported within like a GDPR country base, depending on how you write your rules. You'll be able to take multiple tools and condense them down to one. And ultimately, what was kind of Google's data can finally be recaptured by the marketer and become your data. And I'm not advocating for not using GA4 or Google Analytics. They still have a place in every marketer's tech stack. But ultimately, our goal here is we want to move from just a top of funnel data strategy to a full funnel strategy where we actually understand the journey to revenue. My goal for you guys is the result is that your clients love you more, your boss loves you, your insights come easy so that you can be a better marketer, and your ROI will ultimately skyrocket.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and open it up to questions. So feel free to raise your hand or drop a question in the chat. David, if you would like to, you're welcome to come off of mute and ask your question.
Sorry, just finding my mute button. I was just finding out obviously if you can start tracking users to that level, how does that affect things? I'm in the UK, obviously. How does that affect things like GDPR?
Yep. Yeah, it's a fair question. So we have some really robust consent features built into the tool right now. They're very focused on Listen Layer and how Listen Layer identifies users and generates the data. That's the feature that's expanding to be more of like a full CMP, like CookieBot, if you will. How it works though, as far as how it relates to Listen Layer, is you go in and you set up what we call regional rules. They're actually all predefined. So there's a regional rule that includes all the GDPR countries, and Listen Layer identifies users and gives you guys the ability to determine how you want that done. You can either do it fully anonymously, which I can drill into. You can do it in kind of a traditional cookie-based way, or you can do it in a more aggressive cookie-based way where we're kind of like identifying the user's device, and it's like cookies on steroids, if you will. Right now, out of the box, the GDPR rules are such that users are fully anonymous. So if you've ever used a tool like Matomo or something like that, it's a very similar concept where a user is created and exists using cryptography, and it has like a time-based algorithm in there. And so it literally is kind of like self-imploding. And so after 48 hours, the user becomes kind of fully anonymous, can never be recreated, can never be traced back to the user, and their personal data is actually not stored. After we release some of our large upcoming releases, we have it on the roadmap to explore splitting our data so that you can actually have a single analytics instance and you can have data storage in GDPR regions for personal data that you might want to collect from that standpoint. So we'll keep addressing the issue. It's definitely a challenging issue, but we have tons of companies in Europe that still use the product right now, and they just use that feature to make sure that they adhere to the local requirements.
Okay, thanks. Brilliant. Thank you.
We're getting a couple of requests, Zach and Rick, for the server side beta link to be dropped into the chat. If one of you could pull that would be awesome.
Yep.
I did get the framework one in there. Let's go ahead. Darlene, I see your hand is up, and then Jay and Martin will get to you.
Hi. So thank you. This was fascinating. A touch over my head, but I am a Listen Layer customer. I just have somebody else doing the work. I just thought I'd share with my peers, and actually thanks to Fred for mentioning Listen Layer. It's a solution that we're using for Acuity forms, which are not tracking in GA4, even though Acuity says that they are compatible with GA4. Zach, I just wanted to know if you had, off the top of your head, any tips about HubSpot. I have a client whose HubSpot form works on the homepage, but not on variations of the homepage, like other pages. I'm not a HubSpot person, but I thought since we were setting up Listen Layer for their Acuity forms, we would try it and see if it helped with HubSpot. Just wondering if anything comes to mind.
Yep. So Rick, maybe you can drop your email in the chat. If you could shoot an email to Rick. So I'll hit on a couple things on your HubSpot forms issue. Ultimately, websites are kind of the wild, wild west. Like any programmer can come in there and kind of finagle things. And so it's still relatively common that companies need to work with us to like dial in kind of the fringes of their measurement strategy and like, oh, this little thing's not working, or we need some custom listener built. And, our goal is to build and continue to evolve into kind of a world-class support service where we're actually helping our clients be successful too. So if you can shoot Rick an email, I want to look at that specifically, and I can give you a more specific answer. Acuity forms is interesting because they actually might be sending data to GA4, and that's one of the challenges is everybody builds a GA4 integration, but you need your data in other places also. One of the challenges with Acuity forms, I just know this because I've kind of fought the battle, is they'll send all calendar event data, even if it's not on your website. So if somebody goes in the back end and like, is on the phone with somebody and schedules a meeting, it'll send event data to GA4 from their system. And so that's why a lot of times Acuity's data as it goes into Google Analytics is extremely messy. So reach out and lean on us from a support standpoint. I mean, the number of tools we've built integrations with, you'd be amazed at how many weird nuances like that we've uncovered and can help you guys with. So
love it. Thank you.
Jay.
Yeah, super easy question or quick question. Hopefully, I was looking at the pricing. I really like the way you guys have everything set up, but I think it looks like your pricing caps out at 150,000 users, monthly users, with like a upcharge per user. And most of our clients are like kind of in the 600, 700, 800,000 a month user count. Do you guys have enterprise plans that scale a little bit better for those size sites?
Yeah, one of the things you can reach out to us on that, because we're releasing server side and the analytics features, we're going to redo our entire pricing plans so that there's fewer of them, they're more scalable, and they're better understood. And my goal is to make as many features available at the lowest level as possible. Understanding that like when you run a massive server side implementation, there's a lot of computing costs that go into that. And so the plans will be evolving, and that's some awesome feedback. But I think we do have kind of some behind the scenes plans that you can't see on the pricing page, that you don't actually see until you're like in there in a sandbox account. So that might be one of the issues also. So again, if you want to ping Rick, I think he dropped his email in there. We can also look at your specific situation and put together some thoughts on that. So
yeah, great. I did sign up for the beta and the demo. I do want to talk to somebody about it, so I'll email Rick. And yeah, as far as like agency accounts or stuff like that, interesting ways to kind of figure out how to do our job as measurement-based marketers.
Yeah, I would love some community feedback on that, because I want to develop an agency kind of package, and that my thinking has always been like agencies could get some sort of wholesale pricing. There's two things that I'm kind of like, I'll keep it to one, but that I have a staunch belief in, which is that ultimately the client should own the end account. And so Listen Layer is always going to have the opinion that like if you come in and you devise a tracking strategy for a client and then they move on to another agency, that they have the rights to take over that account, just because it's the right thing to do. I've lived the agency life and seen where agencies hold in Google Ads accounts hostage and things like that. And so but the idea is that we may have some sort of like wholesale pricing where if you sign up and buy as an agency, you have a discount. But then you can still pass the cost on to the client at market rate. So there's a lot of things like that we want to explore. One other thing in setting up accounts, we have a really cool Slick Wizard as you launch Listen Layer initially onto your website. We will be expanding that to around this idea that we have called the perfect data roadmap, which is depending on exactly what you want to track, kind of a series of steps that you take through those wizards to set up your account in a much more fast way, kind of soup to nuts, beginning to end. So that's a cool feature. I'm actually just fine tuning the requirements on that, and then that'll go to the dev team. So
yeah, it's an interesting balance because we don't ever want to own all the analytical work, but at the end of the day, a lot of the events we're firing are specifically for our A/B tests, so nobody cares about them when we leave. So we do want to kind of clean up as we leave. So there is some part of it that would be good to keep, just in the sense of like nobody's going to want all these data layer events firing. Nobody's going to want all this extra computing, energy put into it. And sometimes we only want to collect certain events or fire certain things during a test for the people in the test, and that's only on a select group of users and stuff. So I'd be interested in talking more about it, but it sounds like you guys have thought about it. So
yeah, let's have a meet.
Okay, Martin, I see you have your hand up. Let's jump over to you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Zach. That was awesome as well. Yeah, I had similar questions that Jay had, basically, about owning data, because I can see on your pricing, you can have 10 domains, 15 domains, whatever it might be. But if you wanted to do that for a client, and then pass them maybe the Listen Layer account if you stop working with them. But that was definitely one of my questions. The other questions I had was, we do a lot of WordPress development. I can see that you have a lot of plugins on there, obviously Gravity Forms, things like that. I think it's great that you can capture those events like on form submission, which is what we do a lot. But I was wondering, with Listen Layer, for example, we do have clients that want to track the thank you page and things like that. And we set up custom triggers or custom JavaScript in GTM that says, hey, if this page gets refreshed, which is something that happens quite a lot, don't count this as a conversion event, or don't fire that tag again. Can Listen Layer do that kind of stuff? And just, I'll add on, what about custom forms or custom coding that's gone into WooCommerce or something like that? A lot to unpack. Sorry.
Yep, that makes sense. So we do have our own version of kind of like page view events. So similar to like what Google Tag Manager has. We have a page requested event, which is when the first HTTP request actually occurs for a page. So that's like super early on. And then the page loaded event, which is pretty much identical to GTM. So long story short, yes, in Listen Layer, you can like write a rule that would say, track my thank you pages. We don't have a feature to reduce the duplicate conversions on a refresh, but that is a great idea. The way that you might do that, and we could implement this at like the conversion or trigger level, would be to put kind of like a time limit where or a duplicate kind of limiter on there where the page view event would occur a second time, but the conversion event may not actually occur a second time. So yeah, that's a great little feature. It wouldn't be too hard to add. So I'll talk to our engineering group about that.
Okay. And for custom forms or customized like WooCommerce, I've got a feature that I'm actually looking at implementing with server side, and I'll pitch it to you now that you guys could maybe implement it into your tool. We have a lot of clients, like for instance, Jeff, well, he's not our client, but who runs a membership site or a subscription site, right? So you take the payment with WooCommerce, and then in the background, every month or every 3 months, whatever their subscription might be, that subscription renews. Now,
Yep.
the only way to capture that and send that is obviously through the back end, and then send that onto GA or onto Google Ads. If you wanted to send it onto Google Ads, I don't think you'd want to do it 3 months down the line, but definitely to GA maybe, or
Yep.
to another tool, maybe your HubSpot account or Salesforce or something like that. Are you considering that in your server side?
Yes. Yep. So a couple things there. So we do have features for like custom elements, custom listeners. So we have a custom forms listener, and you target your forms with like a CSS ID, a name attribute, or a class. And so if it's a properly formatted HTML form, we can track it. It can be a little challenging around form validations because a lot of programmers build validation responses differently. So you might find in certain situations you have to reach out to us and say, hey, my form's tracking, but the validation event is not working correctly. And we'll, kind of tweak a few things to support your use case. Yes, on all the other things, as far as those being thoughts, they're not on the roadmap yet. We do have a feature on the roadmap that will support what I call custom events, which is where, anybody on your programming team can basically use an SDK to send us your own custom events. So if you do have let's say you have a homegrown e-commerce system, and so we don't have a listener built for it, but you want all the power of Listen Layer, you can just send us little packages of data for those events. So it requires a little bit of programming, but it extends the platform significantly. That would then be carried over eventually to a server-side API where a service like WooCommerce or something can send those backdoor events. That can be challenging for us to automate because a lot of times a service like that requires, that has to happen either in the interface with a user interacting with your application, or it has to happen automatically with like a cron job or something in the back end. But yes, all things that we're considering. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah, or you could connect it through. I mean, we're doing at the moment a bit like listening to the Stripe API when something goes through, and then sending it through. But yeah, I just sort of put it out there. Thanks.
Yeah, WooCommerce does have those kind of a cron job concept with hooks. And so you could, for a service like a system like that, you could probably tap into those hooks, I would think, at the server side. So
for sure. But yeah, really cool tool. Thank you for the demo.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I love the ideas. I mean, that's one reason why, the platform keeps evolving, and we love working with people and getting feedback and building in their ideas. I think, Jay, are you next, or was there somebody else before?
I think Jay is next. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that did pop a question in my head, what Martin was talking about, and I wanted to see about, I think it sounds like your data tracking strategy, and this is why we go to data layer most often, is to get away from tracking thank you page visits as conversions. Rather, we like to fire a data layer event on form submission, or if the platform can do it, fire data layer events when we, server side, when we know that it's the first time a thank you page is being visited right after a transaction. So if that's your data tracking strategy, but you're using listener events on form submission, how late can you fire that event? Do you wait for payment processing confirmation? Are you able to listen that closely to the event right before the page loads and switch it, redirects them to a new page? Because the data layer is not persistent, so it doesn't usually carry over to the next page load. So how does that work?
That's correct. So first of all, I'm the biggest opponent of thank you page tracking. So I'm with you there. I do not like thank you page tracking for so many different reasons I could go into, but sometimes you have to track a thank you page, and there's no way around it, and that's totally fine. We do track the actual form submissions for form listeners, and we do track the actual purchase in the e-commerce tools. E-commerce is hard because you're almost always having to wait for some sort of callback from the system for the exact reason that you just mentioned. Like, we don't know that Stripe has, or whoever has actually processed the transaction accurately. So the e-commerce listeners are much harder to build. They all work a little bit differently. But yes, the intent there is to track only the actual valid and verified purchase. Even though the data layer is not persistent, it still is there, right? So whether it fires like, in the case of an e-commerce purchase, it's probably firing on the next page. But regardless, it's still firing somewhere in that transaction, and it appears as a JavaScript object that's captured over the network using a network call. So it all still works, although it can, if you think too deeply about it, it's like a little confusing about like what's the order of operations that it happens and all of that. But it does occur that way and work still from a collection standpoint.
So it works. So the strategy works, and you can stop doing thank you page tracking hypothetically and just move straight to successful payment page completion.
Correct. But a service like WooCommerce is still going to have that purchase confirmation page, and that might be a native part of how they do the hook back when they confirm that the purchase and the actual transaction has been completed. So you may not be able to get rid of the thank you page, but your tracking is not just a view of the thank you page. It's the actual purchase event instead. And then on server side, how that works, just to kind of extrapolate a little bit on that. And the idea being in that an ideal world, when we launch what I call our custom endpoints or custom domain endpoints, ListenLayer gives you a subdomain to go create in your DNS, and you point that to our service, and it's all run through Cloudflare, that aspect of it. So Cloudflare's service automatically issues an SSL certificate for that subdomain. And then you simply have to update your ListenLayer script, but that's even not required. That's only required if you really want everything running. But then if you move all your destinations to server side, to the extent that you can, if you have like a chat tool, you can't move that script to server side, but everything else moves to server side. So you're not loading Google Ads, Google Tag Manager, or you could get rid of Google Tag Manager, Facebook, LinkedIn. The number of scripts that are loaded on a site is crazy. Get rid of all those because they load server side. The only thing that loads then is the ListenLayer library, and which is extremely optimized. We're always kind of constantly optimizing it down. We have it broken into chunks. So if you want to keep it thinning it out, you can turn off like certain listeners and certain features and things like that. But it'll be totally unnecessary because you're offloading so much, you still shrink your load by probably 90 to 95%. The cool thing is then all the activity happens over your domain name. So the loading of the ListenLayer script is first party. Any cookies that still remain are first party, although a lot of those cookie concepts, like, if you come in on the site, like LinkedIn puts a cookie on your browser so that they can track you. Instead, ListenLayer captures that cookie, associates it with your user ID in the cloud, and it's used during the server-side data handoff. So then the data layer event activity just gets collected over your domain to a server-side like node that's kind of just exists at the edge of the world's cloud network, and gets packaged up with like missing information, like your cookie information and all of that, and sent to LinkedIn. So just a little bit in the weeds of how that works. It's literally like in ListenLayer going to be a flip of a switch. And then if you have a client-side deployment already in place, it'll pop open a wizard that you go through to kind of clean up that client-side implementation. And that's where you can have ListenLayer kind of like unpublish a bunch of stuff in GTM, or just move it into a folder for you to then go and review and kind of do what you want with it from a client-side standpoint. So.
Well, I have another question, but it's a totally selfish one. So if anybody else is waiting, I don't want to hog the last few minutes.
All right, last chance for questions, everybody. We are getting to the hour. I think a lot of people got to jump off. I have to jump off as well in a little bit, but if anybody has a question, speak now, or we'll get over to Jay and then we'll wrap it up after that. All right, Jay, go for it.
Okay, so A/B testing is all we ever do. So I have a client, basically one of the tests we're about to launch, and the only way to get into the test, we're setting up targeting that if you're filling out the lead form and you select a specific business, let's just call it industry, from the drop down, and then submit the form, now you're going to be entered into the A/B test and split trafficked. And this actually, your platform gives me a lot of excitement about using this to be really precise with entry into A/B tests and multivariate testing, because I can use the data layer and that neat little tool you had where I can kind of browse the site and say like, all right, let's see what's going on. Okay, I want to use this as the trigger. And then I can go back to like optimize, or I guess not optimize anymore, but it'll be whatever. And I'll say, watch for this data layer event. When you see it, that's your sign to enter somebody into an A/B test. Do you have any clients that are using listen layer in that fashion where they're using it for A/B testing?
Yep. And generally speaking, listen layer sees and has access to everything client side. So like if you have a form with a drop down and you want to trigger something based on that, you can see in the data layer what the value is that the user selected. So a lot of times people use that in a chat tool where they'll have like an entry form on the chat. And it's like, do you want a support chat or a sales chat? And they want to split their conversions and just track sales chats, not just all chat starts, right? And so, yes, you could like key off that field. It's definitely an advanced use case. You could key off that field and push another custom value into the data layer, or even store a cookie value using listen layer just by writing kind of a visual rule. And then your optimizing tool, whatever you end up using, can read either that cookie to trigger the test or read the data layer event to trigger the test. Or you could just send that event characteristic or a property on a user to GA4. So then you can isolate, here's the users that were in this version of test versus that version of the test. So you could use it for a number of situations. Definitely, a bit, it would require a bit of knowledge of navigating around and deploying certain things in the tool, but definitely possible. So
I'll be asking Rick about that when I email him. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for coming, by the way. This is a great, awesome overview. I'm definitely excited as well. We might be inviting you back. We have something in the works for server side and
nice.
tagging in general. So I think that this won't be the last time we'll talk to each other. We'll reach out offline, but I think I'd like to spark up a few conversations out of this. And I'm glad that everybody had this overview. It is nice how it's both like you mentioned specific software, but it sounds like it's a lot more malleable than that. It's like software use cases are sort of the supported ones, but you can use it for a lot of different use cases, which is awesome. And that's what I think we all need, especially in the current time. And I like your messaging too around like we're doing a whole thing about owning your data, and you're in the data freedom. So very similar philosophies here. And so take some control of what you collect. So great to have you guys on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, and we'll see you guys next time.